Tom Keesee arraigned today. Bond was set. $2 million cash bond. He also has some conditions. Apparently, he has to surrender his passport as well as his driver's license. He can have no contact with the victims. The no contact is a typical, it is a typical, what's the word I can't think today. I am literally so tired. But that is something that they typically put in place with any of these, anything with domestic violence, anything with assault, battery, anything like that. There is going to be a no contact order. It's a provision of his bond. So the $2 million is a cash bond from my understanding. I did watch the video of the hearing, and so the county prosecutor, or the state prosecutor, sorry, the assistant state prosecutor, it's not the elected prosecutor. We saw Jenny Wells at the the indictment hearing. They had I can't speak today, really. All right, let me start over. At the arraignment press conference, she spoke, and at the hearing today, which was the arraignment, was an assistant prosecutor. So it's not clear who will be actually handling the case. Jenny Wells said that she was the special prosecutor, but those duties can certainly fall down to her assistant prosecuting attorneys as well, because they're operating as prosecutors under her authority. So that is a possibility. I do not personally know how big that prosecutor's office is, but in any event, the assistant prosecutor asked for a $5 million bond. And then the defendant's attorney got up and he was making statements that, just pointing out the time that it's been since the last offense, and that he doesn't have a criminal record, and that he's not a flight risk. These are things that we anticipated. I've talked about these things before in videos, and while it's true he doesn't have a criminal history, there is a flight risk due to the fact of the severity of the charges and his access to wealth. So while the prosecutor, the assistant prosecutor, said that he has access to a plane, and then the defense attorney said no, he doesn't have a pilot's license, he doesn't own a plane, that's not the same. It was there wasn't much argument there, but these are pretty standard statements, and the judge, he's going to do what he's going to do, and both parties probably realize that. I think that there could have been a little bit of grandstanding by the defendant's attorney, simply because this is a highly publicized case, and he wanted to make an impression for his client and his client's family, who has probably retained him. So where we go from here, at the end of it, I was waiting and I was watching and listening, and the judge said, all right, we'll set it for trial. So I'm listening closely. There was no trial date. Usually what happens when the judge says that, everybody kind of perks up and then they figure out a date, they pull out their calendars, but that didn't happen. Everybody just closed up and that was it. So I don't know how they do it there, but possibly what's going to happen is they'll get it some other day, that the court will contact them and they'll coordinate it somehow. I'm not sure how it works there, but that appears to be what is next on the agenda. And there's going to be discovery. So as the defendant's, Tom Keesee, he's the defendant. I'm going to refer to him as the defendant, or Tom. His attorney said, I have to sneeze, and he said that he's looking forward to discovery. Well, I don't think anything has been turned over to him. I did read an article where he said, I doubt there's any forensic evidence. Well, that's right. I mean, I've shared that throughout all of my videos. There's not going to be. These victims are looking back over 15 years. They did not seek any medical treatment. That's not in dispute. There's no videos that I'm aware of. There's no pictures that I'm aware of. It's going to be their word, their testimony, And interestingly, the defendant's attorney said that there was no admission. My understanding is that Tom Keesee has admitted to some of the acts to some people. Why that was not brought up by the prosecutor, I don't know why. So if I was handling the case, I actually was talking to one of my partners yesterday, and I said what I would have asked for a bond, I would have asked for 10 million. That's just what I would have done, because there's so many charges. They are very, very serious. There's 3 victims. He has access to a lot of money, and for any average bear, any average person, 5 million, 2 million might not be a big deal. And I'm sorry, to the average person, that might be a big deal, but 10 million, you got to remember that we're dealing with people that are wealthy. So me personally, I thought about it. I gave it some thought. That's what I would have asked for. Doesn't matter. I'm not putting anybody down or saying what they should or shouldn't have done. I'm just saying, just my thought process, that's what I would have asked for. And I would have definitely, of course, even if I didn't ask for the no contact, that's just going to happen across the board. The judge would have done that anyhow. And the fact that he had to relinquish his passport and his driver's license, so he cannot be driving around town, where I know people have been reporting that they have seen him driving around town. He cannot drive around town. He will have a GPS monitor. It's an ankle monitor. He will have that, but it did not appear that there were any specific provisions, at least stated in court. Probably what he has to do is meet with the the agency or the party or the administrator of whoever is going to provide that device. And it typically, they work with probation, and they will make some kind of recommendations or conditions in regard to that. Perhaps they didn't say it, but there could be some type of provision where he cannot be out after a certain time. I mean, that's, or maybe now that they do it, they just have it because they're tracking him wherever he goes. That could be that too. I didn't hear anything about him not being able to leave the state. So that was something that we didn't hear. And, my concern, like I've said before, this is somebody that has access to funds. He owns property. There's no dispute about that. And so, yeah, I mean, that is a very, a big concern. His attorney said that if he wanted to flee, he would have. There were times that I said that too. I said, I'm a little surprised that he's sticking around, because on the one hand, I'm thinking, does he think that this is just going to blow over? Because you've heard it all. Whenever the whistleblowers would say something to Drenda, or an elder, when they brought these things up and their concerns about what they saw, it was just dismissed. And in fact, Connie, she talked about it. She said that people were told not to talk to her. And so she was alienated after she went to Drenda and said, hey, I'm concerned about these things. And so here we are, we've got now the people that have been dismissed. Well, good for you, every single one of you whistleblowers that stood in the gap for the victims and did not relent, and you just continued to fight, because that's why we're here. This went to social media. This is a perfect example of why social media is so important, and a perfect example of why you see people that hate the truth bashing social media. They hate the fact that we can go to social media and talk about things that are important, and to get the attention of people so that this doesn't happen again. Another point I want to make out is that the podcasters will continue, and I can speak for myself, I will continue to speak about this as often as possible when things come up, because this should remain on the forefront. It's not like, you see a documentary of something and you have for a couple of minutes or hours, you're just appalled at something, and then it kind of goes away, right? That's how it goes. With this, it's going to be in the forefront. I believe that the media is picking it up. There were so many articles that I've seen in the last 2 days since the arraignment, more so than ever before. And even today, I mean, I looked at several articles that just came out today. I don't think it's going to stop. I suspect, this is just based upon my own experience, just in life, that victims are going to come out that perhaps were waiting on the sidelines to see what would happen here. And maybe they're saying, oh, they're safe. They're safe to come out because thank God the sheriff came out and said, we're on the side of the victims. We are protecting the victims. We're interested in justice. And he said it several times to come forward if you are a victim or if you have any information. So again, if that is you or you know someone that has information, please bring it to the Licking County Sheriff. They are investigating. They are continuing to investigate. Another point that I want to make is that as a lawyer, I have to remind you all, if you're new to my channel, I'm a lawyer. There are certain things that I will not say, okay? You know, I have an oath that I took. And there are, you know, when people, they comment on my posts or even on Facebook or whatever, and, you know, if they're like engaging and they want to do something that just, I'm saying this generally, there are things that I will not comment on or things that I will not engage in because of my role as an attorney. Okay? Maybe I'll expand upon that later as time goes on, but for now, just so that you know. Also, I try to, you know, I'm reporting what I believe to be the facts. I am not here to make egregious statements or, you know, I'm not here for likes, and I've never even asked for that. I'm here to share the truth. So I'm saying that for a reason, but just so that people realize that what you're not going to get here is, I'm not about drama. I'm not about just, you know, trying to get attention. This is all about victims and victim advocacy and making people aware of what's going on, because as you can see, you still have the sympathizers for any of these people that are already known to abuse people. Dr. Michael Brown, Mike Bickle, Daystar, Drenda and Gary Keesee, Art Lucier. You've got people that are standing behind them. I know that it was probably very hard for the people who, because the victims weren't there today at that at that arraignment. But I do know that past FLC members were there. I do know that whistleblowers were there. And I know that it was hard because we stand with the victims and we know what they went through. And when you have people that are, you've got Gary and Drenda Keesee in the audience, in the gallery, behind their son. Where are they in regard to their daughter? They're not behind their daughter. And we know that. And it's very troubling when their attorney makes statements saying that they are behind victims and they condone any such activity. But clearly they don't. They are on the side of their son. And they have an attorney, and we knew this. I told you all before. I said that what's going to happen at the arraignment is he will enter a plea of not guilty, absolutely 100%, and he did. And as I said, they'll waive the charges, the reading of the charges. That's what they did, and that makes it a shorter hearing, and that's just how it is. Will it get, it's going to change, okay? The scenario is going to change because it's going to shift into trial mode. Discovery. I'm not sure if they do depositions there in criminal court. We do that here in Florida, where we are allowed to take depositions even on a criminal case. I'm not sure if they do that in Ohio. We did not do that in Michigan. Instead, we had a preliminary hearing. So it was like this very, very mini hearing, and you would put the witnesses on, or your evidence on, your detectives on, and then it would get bound over to the circuit court, which is the felony court. In Ohio, what took the place of a preliminary or probable cause hearing is the fact that it went to a grand jury, and that's where they got the indictment. And as you heard, at the press conference, it was the press, it was private, and there were press that were asking the sheriff and the prosecutor about the witnesses, and the prosecutor even said, I don't know how many witnesses there were, but she said around 40. That does not mean that all 40 witnesses were people that knew that this happened. That doesn't mean that. It means that they interviewed about 40 witnesses. Does that mean that those 40 people they interviewed are going to be witnesses? No. I would bet that the victims are also included in that 40. So you can't speculate in that regard. There were 40 people approximately that they interviewed, and that's where they are now with the 27 counts that went to the grand jury. We have the indictment, we have the charges, and he's been arraigned. Now, there's still room for investigation because they have said that. So does it mean that this is all that we're going to see with Tom? Probably not. We may see additional charges with other victims, perhaps not with the already 3 established, but we could. It's not outside the realm of possibility. So we just don't know. There is also another person that is being investigated in Fairfield County. That's Austin Dempsey. And I believe there's at least 2 victims in regard to that. Not much being said about that. I don't know where they are in that, but I believe that they might be close to finishing that up. I just from what I'm hearing, but I could be wrong. But that is something that we're going to keep a watch on as well. Different county, so it'll have a different sheriff and it will have a different prosecutor. Another thing that we're going to keep in mind as we approach while they're doing discovery is whether the defense attorney is going to try to separate the counts because each of the victims. I believe that the prosecutor will want to prosecute them all at once, and that's something that might be challenged at some point. There may be some motions that they file. I'm not quite sure what those could be, and even the defense probably doesn't know what there could possibly be right now because he hasn't even received any of the discovery. What is discovery? Well, it's going to be any of the statements that the witnesses wrote, any of the statements that the victims wrote, any and all of the reports made by any of the detectives, any recordings, any emails, any texts, anything like that. So whatever that is, so the defense is entitled to that evidence, okay? The state will be using the witnesses' testimony. They're not going to be using the statements, okay? But the statements can be used to impeach. What does that mean? That means that in the event a witness or a victim is up on the stand and they're testifying, and through discovery, right, the defense, they have a statement that was made by that witness or victim, and it's different from what they're saying. They can use that to say, well, you remember you made a statement on this and this date, right? Is this your signature, or do you remember writing it, whatever? And you said this, this, and that. And you would agree with me that this is different from what you're saying today. So they would agree that that would be a different statement that could be used to impeach them and to, chip away at their credibility. So what I see from everything that I've read, looked at, everything that I've gathered so far is the testimony is the evidence that's coming from the witnesses. It's going to be the victims and anyone else that can corroborate them. in regard to where they were at the same time, because they have to place the victim there with the defendant in these certain time frames. So a lot will happen, and I think that it'll probably die down a little bit right now, just because we're waiting for a trial date. Now that he has an attorney, there's no indication that this attorney that I'm aware of is somebody that would bring in a team. I just briefly looked him up. If he is a one-man show, he likely will not invoke speedy trial, because he will need time to get prepared for trial. If he gets a team on, then that could be something he does. But more likely than not, if his client is out on bond and living his life, they'll extend this. So my guess is that speedy trial will not be invoked here, and that this will be extended for a couple of years. And that's just the reality of it. Some of these trials, they can happen in a year or two. Some of them, it takes more time than that. So that's what I have to share about what happened today. Moving forward, we might not see anything for a while. Hopefully we will find out what the trial date is, and go from there. And so in the meantime, I will be reporting if something comes up, and I look forward to the next video.